Everyone, and welcome to the Rural Innovation Stronger Economy, also known as RISE, follow-up webinar. This session will focus on providing clarification in the application process, resources available, and address some of the questions received since the original June 22nd session. With that, I would like to turn the presentation over to Rural Business Cooperative Service Deputy Administrator, Mark Brzezinski. Mark?
Thank you, Taylor, and good morning to all. We definitely appreciate your ability to join us today. As Taylor referenced, today we really want to focus on a little bit more deeper dive kind of into the program requirements, the application process rolling forward. We had a tremendous turnout for our original rollout of webinar in June. And I think a good number of questions and conversations have continued from that. But we're glad to connect with you again today to dive a little deeper into some of the issues and questions. I'm sure you'll hear is that, of course, our deadline for the application process is coming up quick in a couple of weeks with the August 2nd deadline. We're definitely interested in helping all we can to provide technical assistance for the application process. But we know that with the strong interest in the program, there may be some of you that are basically that window for application period is maybe too short, or simply that the demand for this program may exceed our resources available in the sense of funding available for the program. But we would encourage any of you, either those that are unable to submit an application or those that don't receive funding in the program, to please continue to connect with us and work forward. In addition to rolling out the program funding, we're also rolling out additional network opportunities. We're in contact with some of our federal partners, other program activities, trying to put together a broader federal partners team to help support the RISE program directly and to support, I think, all of the other initiatives that you and your regions are working on. We would highly encourage you to just register to our program webpage, and as we stand up more of the networking opportunities, other technical assistance and other resources, we'll post that information to our webpage and would encourage you to engage and follow up with further conversations on that part of it. Again, we thank you for joining to dive into the details today. Today, we hope to have a good part of our hour available for questions, for discussions with you. So please feel free to engage in the chat or other conversations today. Again, I thank you for joining. In advance of engaging, we also thank you for the conversation today. I'm going to turn it over to David Chestnut. David is our branch chief standing up this program and lead. So David, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. And again, good morning, and thank you everyone for joining us on the call today. RISE is a highly anticipated program, and it's a highly of interest, and we appreciate Mark's support as well as Administrator Karama Neal, and all the way up through Secretary Vilsack, who is interested in getting dollars out on your doorsteps to get a jobs accelerator program going in your regions that you self-define. I want to specifically thank Will Dodson for his work in not only working with us in creating the regulation, but standing up most of the questions and answers and presenting today. So Will is our loan and grant analyst and specialist, lead program on RISE. We've been answering questions, and this is just a follow-up to that. Again, we appreciate your questions in the chat box. We'll get to them as we go through. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Will.
All right, thanks, Dave. I appreciate you. And if we could move into the next slide, please. Welcome, everybody. We're happy to have you on this session. And just quickly going through the agenda today, after our first webinar, we were inundated with questions via email. And we have been working hard to get answers back to you as timely as possible. So stay patient with us. We've been averaging, getting an answer back each, the day you send the question, unless we're out of town, and both Dave and I were out of town for a week. So there was a couple of delays on that, but I believe we've got everybody answered. So just know that we're getting a number of emails and we will respond to you and get back to you. So moving into the agenda today, we're going to cover critical eligibility criteria, and we're going to highlight some key questions that we've been receiving since our kickoff of the program and our first webinar. We're going to move through those frequently asked questions. We're going to provide you some scenarios just to get you thinking about, what we are looking at. Of course, this is the first year of the RISE program, so we don't have any awards to date, but we do have a competition that was a precursor to the program that we were able to pull some examples from to give you an idea. And then we'll have a wrap up and hear from you. And I promise I'll get through these sections as quickly as I can so that we can get some good questions in the chat and get some answers back to you. So next slide, please. Well, while we're waiting on the slide to advance, I did want to make a comment. We've had a number of questions from universities and various questions, but there's a couple just hot topic items, and I don't have a slide for this, so I wanted to go on and cover it. If we can get somebody advancing slides, I'd appreciate it. So with the RISE program, we've received questions about utilizing those funds for an academic program or some type of curriculum. And, we understand the importance of that, but RISE is intended for a different purpose. So RISE has to target a region, it has to target an industry cluster, and it has specific uses, which we'll cover in this presentation. So keep that in mind. It's not a program that can provide support for, for an academic program or some type of degree program targeting students and that type of thing. Additionally, another hot topic item is indirect cost. And we understand that indirect cost is a big factor, particularly for universities. But keep in mind that for RISE, that there's not more than 10% of the RISE grant that shall be used for indirect costs. And that's cost of the applicant administering the RISE grant itself. Additionally, there's a 10% cap on administrative costs. So keep that in mind. There's a cap with that. And then we get the question about, can I use indirect cost, or I have an indirect cost rate of X? Can I use that for the matching funds? The match itself for RISE has to be tied to the activity that is found in the project scope and in the application. And when a draw is made on the RISE grant, there's got to be that 20% match to that request. That match has to come from an authoritative source in the partnership. So if a university is a partner in the partnership, they need to provide an authoritative source of those funds. That could be a controller from their financial department, what have you, for the funds that are going into the project that's dedicated for RISE purpose. So keep that in mind, because we do get that question. It's got to be tied back to RISE, the RISE purpose, the goals of RISE, what's stated in the application itself. So not sure what's happening with the presentation. I just see myself.
Hey, Will, this is Dave. We just got a message that Taylor Avens, who is running our slides for us and from the Innovation Center in Rural Development, her computer crashed. So she's booting back up. So when she gets back on, we'll move slides. But just a question that came through. Just want to answer a question before we get in. We're repurposing a Brownfield building that was recently donated to the nonprofit. Can the value of that building be used as an in-kind match? And
yeah, it's possible to use it as a match, but you have to remember that the match has to show up in each activity. So if it's being repurposed as Innovation Center and the budget is set up where that's coming in as in-kind match or what have you for the project, remember it's got to tie back to that particular activity. So let's say that you've got 3 3 draws on the grant. And the first one talks, the first draw is involves the, the rehabilitation and, creation of the innovation center at that brownfield site. You'll have to be, you can show that as the match to that activity. It's a little bit more complicated to do that, but it's possible to consider that as, for matching purposes. Matching funds were, we set that up a little broadly so that we could have, in-kind donations, third-party contribution, that type of thing.
And I would also add that if it's a major renovation, I mean, if you just have a building and you're going to be doing a lot of work on that, innovation centers for new innovation centers and those with the large renovation costs, those have to be located in a low-income community. So make sure that we want to make sure that project is in an eligible area before you start using RISE funds on that activity.
So Dave, I was looking to see if we had the presentation. I can actually start going through the presentation.
There's a small, question here, just one. Will the presentation cover the application itself? We're not going to go through the application line by line. The application template is available on our website, and that'll pretty much guide you through the information that's needed for the application. And just a reminder that applicants must be a partnership between at least 2 entities, 2 eligible entities, and that partnership must be formed after December 20th, 2018. That date is in the statute as far as when the partnership must be formed, and that was the date the Farm Bill was signed. So that's why that date is there. But we're not going to go through the application line by line. And then definition used for low income area, that's set by the American Community Survey through the Census Bureau. So we as rural development do not dictate that, but you can look up in the American Community Survey and see what's a low income area for that. So it's based on income data acquired through the Census Bureau, and it'll be their most recent information.
So Dave, I had a thought if, I could start working through the presentation. We've got the presentation as a handout. So yeah. You should be able, oh, there we go. We're back.
There's Taylor.
There we go. All right, let's kick it off. All right, so moving, Taylor, I hope you're well and all's well in Iowa. So RISE eligibility path. So there's 4 key components, and that's what we'll cover here. We're gonna just briefly go through these. There's a partnership requirement, there's a region eligibility requirement, an industry cluster focus, and the purpose of the RISE, including eligible cost and match. But in summary, a RISE applicant must be a partnership, and that's key. We get a lot of questions of, I'm a business, I'm an entity, I'm an individual. You have to be a partnership, must be formed on or after December 20th, 2018. That's the Farm Bill enactment, and that's where the RISE program was birthed. So that's the deadline that it's tied to. The purpose is applying for funding an innovation center and related job training programs targeting a particular region, which is low income and rural, and targeting a particular industry cluster. So we'll move into those components. Next slide, please. All right, I see movement. That's good. All right, so keeping with that for the partnership requirements, as I said, there's a deadline for that. We get a lot of questions about this. The partnership agreement, we're not looking for anything too complex, too full of legalese. It's simply a document that defines who the parties are and their working relationship and responsibilities for delivering the RISE grant for this particular project in their region. There must be at least 2 entities in the partnership, and the types of entities are limited to the entities on the next slide. So next slide, please. So this is from our earlier presentation, but this breaks it down. We get a lot of questions in this area, but you have to have a lead applicant, and that lead must be one of the entities that are in the orange bubble, a district organization tribes, political subdivision of a tribe, or a consortium of Indian tribes. We got a question about consortium, 2 or more. So that's the way we're looking at consortium. State and local governments or political subdivisions, institutions of higher education, public or private nonprofit. So the lead has to be an entity that meets one of these criteria. On the green side, you have to have at least one partner, and I'm not going to read through that, but you see the different types of entities. The question comes in, we've got legal existence before December 20th, 2018. That's fine. We're talking about the partnership agreement for this RISE grant. So that's what we're looking at. Again, simple document, partners, responsibilities for administering RISE. That's all we're looking for. Next slide, please. So the RISE partnership, the second component, must focus on a region. So we get a number of questions, I'm serving this town, what have you. And so keep in mind that there has to be a region, and the applicant is responsible for defining that region. So it's 50,000 or less is the rural definition, that we have across programs at rural development, and it applies to RISE. It's comprised of, the region must be comprised of rural areas. Additionally, the region must have a majority of communities that are located in a low-income community. So if we'll go to the next slide, please. And keep in mind, that's majority. So we're talking about greater than 50%. So you see that last bullet includes a majority of communities located in a non-metropolitan area deemed a low-income community that has a plan to achieve broadband service and a population of 50,000 or fewer inhabitants. So when we get these questions, we go back to this time and again. It's got to be rural. The region has to be rural, large enough to contain critical elements of an industry cluster. That's also a piece that's usually missing that we see. There needs to be a focus on an industry cluster itself, but small enough to enable close collaboration among members of the partnership. Next slide, please. Another part of this is one or more members of the partnership must be located in the targeted region. So keep that in mind as you're putting partners together for this RISE project, that at least one must be located in that region. But again, the RISE program is not limited only to low-income areas. A majority of the communities in the region must be considered low income. And the RISE program is not limited only to energy distressed communities. We've had that question a number of times, but the link in the NOFA provides a list of energy distressed communities that are eligible to potentially receive administrator points. We've received questions about that list and who's on that list. We don't have any control over who's on that list. We are researching the possibility of that list being updated or if it'll be updated, but we don't have capacity to control who is designated on that particular energy list, and understand the concerns from different states in terms of why isn't my community on this? Just keep in mind, we don't control that. We're trying to get answers as to how frequently that will change, if at all. So next slide, please. So the third piece, the RISE project must focus on an industry cluster. And the industry cluster defined in our RISE regulation is a broadly defined network of interconnected firms and supporting institutions in related industries. So related is what's key with that. The cluster accelerates innovation, business formation, and job creation by taking advantage of assets and strengths of a region in the business environment. That is the key of the RISE project itself, focusing on industry cluster and creating the end goals of high wage job creation and business formation. Next slide, please. So fourth component, the RISE purpose. RISE cannot be used as a pass-through grant to an individual or an entity, even those within the partnership. One of the questions we get is, we want to lease the building that we will house the Innovation Center, we want to lease that from a partner in the partnership. Unfortunately, we can't do that with RISE grant funds. So those RISE grant funds cannot pay for a lease to that partner, because that would be a pass through of those funds to the partner in that partnership. So keep that in mind. But really, we've received a number of questions like this. Again, the grant cannot go to an individual, cannot go to an entity, cannot go to your small business. And what I've said is, when I get that type of question, is understand that there's a need and you have a project, and I'll refer, every day I'll refer you to our state office business program staff that covers your state, because they have a wide array of programs that can possibly meet that need. But this grant, unfortunately, does not go directly to a business or an entity. Grants are only for the purpose of constructing, purchasing, or equipping a building to serve as an innovation center in order to establish a job accelerator, and also the related programming that comes into play with that. And on top of that, we'll expand out just on RISE purposes. These are very general, but RISE has some specific purposes included under eligibility. Next slide, please. So again, construction or purchase of a building to serve as an innovation center. If that's the case, it must be located in a rural, low-income community. So we get that question. If you have an innovation center that is in an urban area, then we can't pay for any type of costs associated with that building. But the RISE grant could cover the programs that are administered to an eligible region. So if that makes sense. So if the innovation center is in an urban area, we can't do anything for the physical, building or purchasing, or any type of improvements to that building, but we can provide support for the program that's serving an eligible rural low-income region. But if the innovation center is to be located in an area that's rural and low income, then we can consider construction, renovation, that type of thing. Again, support of the programs to be carried out at the job accelerator. To my point earlier, RISE has a number of initiatives, and these are activities that can be included in eligible costs. And I won't read through all these, but some, from linking rural communities and entrepreneurs to markets, integrating rural small businesses into a supply chain, et cetera. So keep in mind, there's a number of initiatives that, can be considered in the work that is done at the Innovation Center itself. Next slide, please. So RISE eligible costs more specifically provide eligible, or the following eligible uses: reasonable and customary travel expenses that have to be directly related to the job accelerator, utilities, operating expenses of the Innovation Center and job accelerator programs and associated programs. Next slide, please. And as mentioned earlier, not more than 10% of the RISE award, the grant itself, shall be used for indirect costs of the applicant associated with administering the RISE grant. So the RISE program, we want to ensure that that these awards are going to the job accelerators. They're doing what they're supposed to do in terms of the programs being offered, the high wage job creation and new business formation, but we want to make sure that it's not a fund for administrative costs only. So there's a cap on that. Just to highlight again, the Innovation Center may be physically located in a rural area or in a non-rural area, as long as assistance is being provided to residents of a rural area. Next slide, please. So what is an Innovation Center? And we're still on the fourth point. An Innovation Center is a cross-functional place for the planning and creation of new ideas and opportunities for individual and group collaboration that leads to supporting deployment of innovative processes, technologies, services, and products for economic development. They may be used for a wide array of purposes. I won't go through all those purposes below, but in a little bit, we'll differentiate innovation centers and incubators, which we get a number of questions on. Next slide, please. So we mentioned rural job accelerators. What are we talking about here? We're talking about a center or program located in or serving a rural low-income community that may provide co-working space, in-demand skills training, entrepreneurship, and business support. And remember, it must be located in a rural area. Next slide, please. So continuing on the fourth point, innovation centers may support business incubators as one of the services, but business incubators alone are not necessarily innovation centers. I kind of look at it as the bourbon and whiskey deal. So bourbons are all considered whiskey, but not all whiskeys are considered bourbon. Same with incubators and innovation centers. So keep in mind, then the incubator could be a part of that overall project and programming, but not the sole purpose. So again, innovation centers must provide qualified industry cluster support programming to benefit residents of the targeted region, resulting in high-wage job creation, new business formation, and bolstering existing businesses in that region's industries. Next slide, please. So remember, there are several possibilities of activities conducted at the Innovation Center's Job Accelerator, and we've color-coded these so you don't get eye strain reading through this, but there's a number of initiatives identifying and building assets in rural communities that are crucial to supporting regional economies, facilitating repatriation of high-wage jobs in the United States, supporting the deployment of innovative products, processes, technologies, and products. And I think that part is really key. You know, when you look at this, when I was talking about the incubator earlier, incubators are wonderful systems for businesses to get businesses up and running. And again, this could be part of that. But what we're looking at overall is deployment of innovative products, processes, technologies, and products that are helping a particular region's industry cluster. And there's more initiatives listed there. I won't read through all that for time's sake. All of this is found in the regulation and the notice. And again, it's the initiatives that were spelled out in the early stages of the RISE program and the Farm Bill. Next slide, please. All right, moving into frequently asked questions. Next slide. Trying to keep us within the clock. So I think we passed 30 minutes. So I'll keep this rolling so we can have some time for some open Q&A. So going back to the first point, partnership questions. I'm a tribal entity, or I am a business, or I am a city, and want to apply for RISE funding. Am I eligible? The RISE grant must go to a partnership consisting of at least 2 entities. RISE funds may only be used for 80% of those costs directly related to the activities that are eligible under the RISE regulation. Pass-through grants are not eligible. Next slide, please. So what I'm doing now, I'm just hitting the major questions that we've seen since that first webinar. I'm a tribal entity, or I'm a business, or I'm a city, and I want to apply for RISE funding. We're looking at doing X activity for individual operation. Am I eligible? So the RISE grant, again, must go to a partnership consisting of at least 2 entities. There are 2 sides to the partnership, but a lead applicant is required, which can be from a number of entities and at least 1 participating entity, and those entities are spelled out back on slide 10. And again, you've got a copy of the slides and the handouts for your reference, as well as regulation and the notice of funding availability for the program. RISE funds may only be used for 80% of those costs directly related to the delivery of projects eligible under the RISE regulation. Next slide, please. We are ready to launch our programs nationwide. Can we apply for a RISE grant that serves the entire or multiple parts of the country, and are we limited to 1 application? So under RISE, only 1 application may be submitted per lead applicant. So again, lead applicant's key. each year, and the project must target a defined region. That region must be small enough to enable close collaboration among members. Thus, delivery of a nationwide program is likely not feasible, but additionally, the majority of the defined region must consist of low-income communities. Applicants should review the communities being considered under the project to ensure eligibility. Entities may only serve as a lead on one project, but they may be in another RISE partnership, and that's fine. We've had that question. We understand that situation may exist, so know that it's tied to the lead applicant. Also, we're not shutting down a nationwide approach, but it has to make sense in terms of the region being targeted. And, you know, what we envision is a geographic region that's contiguous. That doesn't mean that it has to be contiguous, but there's got to be some type of relationship or between two areas if they're not connected. And we'll get into that in a minute. Next slide. So if our entity existed before December 20th, 2018, are we ineligible? As we form a partnership, is there a process we go through for the application? And another question that we receive is, you know, can you give us a template of the formal agreement that's required? So entities may be in legal existence, of course. We know there's a number of them that, you know, existed before December 20th, 2018, but the RISE partnership must be formed on or after that date. The RISE program does not specify how the entities may form their partnership necessarily. And again, our interest is not in creating a lengthy and legally expensive agreement, but we do require a formal documented working relationship by the partners that are in this RISE grant proposal. And the partnership must be established at the time of application. At least one of the partners must be located in the defined region. So just reiterating that again. And as I said earlier, we've had the question where two entities have worked together in the past. That's fine. We don't have any issue with that, but in terms of this application, this agreement needs to date on or after December 20th, 2018 that's drawn up. And again, it shows the partners, their responsibilities for this proposed RISE project, and we're really not looking for anything too crazy after that. Next slide, please. So I'm a small business in need. Why can I not apply for RISE? Definitely understand the issues, but RISE applicants are partnerships. So again, businesses are able to be a participating partner of the partnership under RISE, and they may also benefit from the programming and support provided by the Innovation Center, but small businesses alone cannot apply and cannot receive RISE grant funds as a pass-through. This question particularly comes up because we have we have grants.gov, and on grants.gov, it lists the eligible entities in the partnership. So that's confusing when you go in. We don't have any ability to narrow that down. So that can be misleading to somebody that goes in, and that's the first, unfortunately, the first thing they see, they think they're eligible. But again, it's got to be a partnership. Next slide. Are RISE grant partnerships restricted to land grant colleges only? So we've received this question a number of times. Partners in the RISE grant program are not limited to only land grant institutions. If the college meets the requirements to be an institution of higher education as defined by the Higher Education Act of 1965, they are an eligible RISE partner. So keep that in mind. It's not land grant institutions only. Next slide, please. So what is rural? What if my center is not rural? Does the region have to connect? And this goes back to my earlier point. The population of the targeted region must be less than 50,000 residents, or the region must be determined as rural in terms of communities and towns assisted. The region does not need to be contiguous, but must somehow be connected through mutual programs of interest or industry clusters. Again, it's got to make sense. It's got to be feasible in terms of what we're looking for in RISE. And my suggestion too is, we get a number of inquiries. Is this region rural? Is this area rural? Talk with your state office that serves your state. They can tell you almost without looking at our mapping system where, in most cases, they can talk to you about the region you're looking at and the communities and tell you what is considered rural or not. We also, there's a system that you can go in and plug in an address, but they'll be able to help you with that. And we've got a link for our state offices, and that's the business program staff at the state office that can work with you on, questions of geography and rural nature and that type of thing. Next slide, please. So we have a county focus, and we see that communities must be low income do we qualify. So the defined region must include a majority of communities that are considered a low income community. And we define that by section 45DE of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986. So we're not creating anything new in the RISE program. We're relying on existing regulation here. So the RISE program may benefit communities that do not meet the low income criteria or are not distressed energy communities. But keep in mind that a majority of the communities in your region, and again, you're responsible for defining your region and the industry cluster or clusters in that region. Next slide, please. We have multiple industries we look to focus on. Is this an issue with RISE? And under RISE, there must be a particular region that is targeted in the application scope, but there can be multiple industry clusters that are part of the project and may provide competitive advantages for that region. So in the project scope and other pertinent areas of the application, one key industry cluster must be the focus, but other industries may also benefit from the project. We understand that. We're not trying to limit if there's a couple approaches to success with the RISE grant. But just keep in mind that the way the application is set up and the program set up, you've got to have one. So if you talk about a second one, that's fine. We're not, we're not coming down on that, but just keep in mind that it's set up for one cluster, that's the focus. But again, if two are involved because of that particular region, we can work with that. Next slide, please. We have an existing business incubator and would like to expand that. Can we do this under RISE? So the RISE grant has to specifically assist with the purchase construction of an innovation center and or equipment supporting the innovation center. So you see innovation center is highlighted in red. An innovation center must be at the core of it, or the programming coming out of the innovation center. So the innovation center is a little different than a business incubator. With that multi-purpose uses of an innovation center operation are the innovation center provides multi-purpose uses versus incubator alone. This isn't to say that the incubator couldn't be part of the innovation center itself. We just need to be sure the project fits the parameters of RISE. So I covered that a little bit earlier. Next slide, please. Can I match the RISE grant with an EDA grant? Does the RISE grant have multi-year draws? What if I can't show matching funds up front in the application, but can show them in the future? So we get a number of questions around this area. The RISE grant must be matched with non-federal funds, and that's statutory, it's part of our regulation, but it's for 20% for each project activity. This means that if the project's activity cost is $1 million, the RISE grant can cover $800,000 of eligible costs, while $200,000 must come from a non-federal source. And in this particular scenario with EDA, the applicant must consult with the EDA grant source to determine if their funds can be used as matching funds for another federal program. But when it comes to our program, it's got to come from a non-federal source for the match. And the source of the matching funds must be committed by the grant closing date, but not necessarily in the bank, so to speak, at the date of obligation. So when we talk about grant closing, we're talking about the date that the applicant becomes a grantee, they sign our financial assistance agreement. As draws are made typically monthly for an activity, the 20% match must be utilized and documented in conjunction with the RISE funds being requested. So keep in mind, you got a number of different types of activities. Each time you go for a draw, you have to show 20% match from the matching source that you indicated in your application. Next slide, please. We are a college and we have waived indirect costs such as facilities and administrative expenses. This is the difference between the university's federally negotiated rate and the 10% indirect allowable on this program. Would this be eligible as a match? So I highlighted this at the beginning. When it comes to matching funds for the RISE grant, the source of the funds should be in the form of third-party equity contributions, including donations and in-kind contributions of fairly valued goods or services for a RISE activity. Cash is king when you can show that for a match, but we wanted to allow other sources of out there to be qualified in the program. But keep in mind that the funds must come from an authoritative source and must be dedicated to RISE and the RISE purpose. So funds that are, multi-purpose funds that are spread over various activities outside of RISE, we're going to have an issue with that. We need to make sure that they're dedicated and it's authoritative, that these funds are available for these RISE activities. When we conduct scoring for RISE, we prefer to see that the in-kind services are dedicated specifically for the RISE activities, again, not lumped into general administrative indirect costs. So I understand that process, especially for universities, but with RISE, we've got these specific requirements and caps. Next slide, please. We have a college that's interested in providing job training. Is this eligible under RISE? We kind of hit on this earlier, but just to reiterate, the college could be a wonderful partner in the RISE partnership of Applicant, and the application scope of work must include programs that will improve the ability of distressed rural communities to create high-wage jobs, accelerate formation of new businesses, and help rural communities identify and maximize local assets. It's a lot to say, but again, the intent of the program is focusing on a region and it's focusing on an industry cluster. So keep that in mind as you're putting your project together. And the partnership scope of work should document that the job training program is focused on an industry cluster and or the creation of or training for high wage jobs in the targeted region. So in general, if it's just a job training program and there's no region identified, no industry cluster where high wage jobs can be created and new businesses formed, and the low income aspect for that region, all the components I talked about earlier, then we could have the issue if it's just a general job training program. But again, a college or university can be a great asset, great partner in the partnership providing that training. But keep in mind that it's got to be in the parameters as mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. We currently are looking at providing, and you can insert any community service building or function. Is this eligible? We understand the significance of communities, facilities and businesses. We have a community facilities program, and when we get that inquiry, we'll reference you to the staff in that particular state because they do have a series of programs that could be a benefit to you. Unfortunately, RISE cannot be used for those purposes. Again, Innovation Center related job programming. Community facilities programs, if you do have an essential community facility you're looking at that'll benefit your community, your town, your region, talk to our community programs folks at your particular state office. And there's a link included in this slide, but you can also, if you have trouble with the link, you can Google community programs USDA and your state, and you should be able to find list of contacts serving that purpose and serving your state. Next slide, please. Trying to keep it moving so we can have some Q&A at the end. Questions come in about agricultural production and production-related activities. Unfortunately, RISE cannot be used to purchase farmland or equipment or for the purpose of agricultural production. Asset purchases must be for the support and operation of the Innovation Center only. Next slide, please. So wanted to give you some scenarios, next slide, please, that will give you just a little bit more idea as to what we're talking about. And these were drawn up from earlier program that was, like I said earlier, a precursor to the RISE program. So in this one, this is an energy cluster community. So it's a rural region composed of several counties, has a history of economic activity in the coal industry, and has recently been on decline. A partnership emerges of a consortium of the city and counties partnering with a local college to form a working partnership to apply under RISE to build an innovation center in a low-income community, providing technological training for renewable energy and energy efficiency careers. This includes energy auditor training, retrofitting training, electric vehicle tech, and renewable energy training. So it just gives you kind of a illustrative example. You know, by no means are we emphasizing one industry over another, but this gives you an idea of how this could flow under RISE. Next slide, please. So the second one involves more of a nature approach. 20 counties in the southwest portion of the state come together to identify a recreation natural heritage industry cluster. Their project focuses on integrating downtown revitalization plans with cultural and natural assets of the region to foster job creation. So the Innovation Center supports the expansion of cultural heritage ventures, tourism initiatives, connecting local assets to networks. Broadband coverage is a part of the project. Next slide. Advanced manufacturing, a partnership with university and private entities in a portion of the state. The region's rural, it's low income. Partnership provides technical assistance, workforce development, collaborated resources to provide high-end skills training, technical assistance, mobile app development, etc. So another one is, as it involves advanced manufacturing, this was actually pulled from a real life example. Next slide, please. Food-related value chain, we get a number of questions about food-related industries and food chains, but a group of entities composed of a lead from a state entity in partnership with several counties and universities focuses on a value chain for regional food. The project expands the business and financial capacity of the region's value chain cluster. Delivery includes technical or tech assistance, coaching services. Goals are increase capacity and extend impact and sustainability of that value chain. It helps cluster participants grow output and revenue and creates high wage jobs in the process. Next slide, please. So more examples that could be highlighted. Back in 2012, I referenced this a couple of times, the 2012 Rural Jobs Innovation Challenge Project Competition. Again, this was a precursor in some ways to the RISE program. And this series of awards, you know, spells out different parts of the country, different industries, and kind of gives you an idea as to what these different groups were doing. So there's a link to that with their project descriptions, just to give you a better idea. Next slide, please. Next slide. So we're going to move into a little bit of a wrap up. I did want to make a comment real quickly because it pops up, and I don't think we didn't highlight this in the slides, but we get a question about broadband, and really we're not looking at the RISE project. We're not even authorized for the RISE program to set up broadband in the area, but there should be a plan for broadband coverage in the area, and that plan is really, you know, you've got maybe counties or cities or what have you that could comment on this, that what is the plan moving forward for internet access in the region, broadband access. But we're not trying to fund that development through this program. The Innovation Center itself, the thinking behind it is that it would feed off that type of technology to have that type of coverage in the region. But it's more of a question of looking at broadband, let's say, as electricity was viewed in the 1930s. Broadband is viewed today. What's the plan for bringing that to this area to connect this region and these companies and these communities to the World Wide Web? So that's the thinking behind that. We do have broadband. We have telecom programs that provide funding in that, so we're not stepping over in that area. But we do get that question from time to time. So what we're asking for is, what's the plan for the region? In terms of, do they have this service now? Will they have it in 5 years? What is the plan? There's a part of the application that talks about that with, just updating what the plan is for that region. So that's these are links for the RISE program. Again, the NOFA, the deadline is August 2nd. The application must be submitted through grants.gov. It's electronic, submitted through there. They will be pulled down after that, after the window closes. The RISE regulation, concurrently, we've got the RISE regulation in its first year out of the gate. It's open for public comment, and it may be found here. We've got a link in this presentation. You can also go to the Federal Register and search for the RISE program itself, Rural Innovation, Stronger Economy, and be able to find this final rule that we're asking for comments on. Those must be submitted by August 16th. Comments are valuable. We looked at the comments last year when we started writing the regulation. Appreciate all the good input that was received, so we're asking for that again. The RISE application link may be found here. That's just a link. You can also go to our website. There's an application link for the application itself. And then lastly, again, sign up on our website to get updates. You'll get updates on the recording. You'll get updates on the program as they post. So at this point, I'm going to move to the next slide. Make sure I see Dave popping up there. He's eager to start jumping into questions. These are just some quick links. We got state office contacts here. You can click there, go to your state, find the business program staff, and they can support you as well on questions. We have a RISE email established that a team of us are working on and reading your emails and responding back to. So that email is included there. And again, check out our website and subscribe for future updates. And Dave, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Will. We've got numerous questions in the chat box, and I just wanted to pop on to kind of say, hey, let's answer some questions here. There are several in the box. I don't know if Taylor wanted to do that. I could certainly do this. Some of them you've answered verbally already, so that's great. Would a building lease fall under an allowed use of funds? And the immediate answer to that is, well, what's the building being used for? Is it part of your innovation center? Are you leasing a building for your innovation center? What's the purpose of that? Is that an activity? Will, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think, as I said earlier, as long, we'd have to make sure that a partner in the partnership is not being paid RISE grant funds for the lease. Also, if it's a lease building, there will be a federal notice of interest filed on that building because, if there's improvements to that building, through grant funds, there'll be a federal interest in that building, which can be complicated for the landlord. Keep that in mind, but that's something that has to be filed. Also, the intent is that, we want to see you've got 4 years of the RISE grant, and you want to see a sustainable program coming out of there. So leasing arrangements will have to, meet the life of, of that RISE grant and those activities that are planned.
Then a question, kind of on the similar lines, and I just lost it. A lot of questions. Thank you for sending all the questions in. And now my computer locked up.
Yeah, we understand it's a complex program, and as I said, we're getting a large number of email questions and inquiries, and that's fine. We're happy to answer those. Just have patience with us as we get to each one. Again, we get a lot of requests for calls and meetings. Unfortunately, we just don't have the capacity just with the volume that we're seeing. So I refer you to our state offices, the state office that covers your particular state if you need to make contact, but we will answer your questions via email, as soon as we can.
Yeah, well, question is, when you say RISE grant funds can't pass through to partners on the project, does that mean that if there's a partner expense in the approved budget, they'll submit an invoice to USDA to get reimbursed rather than the lead applicant doing that and then distributing to the partners, share to them? When we say a lead applicant is who the agency is going to deal with in the project, and your application should outline the expenses in there. So Will, you want to comment on that? Does that mean the partner expense if we approve it for that activity?
Well, I think it depends on what activity you're referencing. That can be a wide array of things. So, we'd have to get more detail as to what's proposed, but, in your project, you're going to have a budget, you're going to have a scope, you'll have an idea as to what eligible, costs and what the grant will go towards. So, you get approval on that, that's something we can work with, but I can't really answer without having details as to what that expense is, because we just want to make sure that there's not funds flowing from one partner to the other. We also get the question that there's not, or, can I administer the grant on behalf of? No. So, we can't pass it through to an end user, that type of thing. But, if it's one of those where it falls in line of, eligible costs that were set up in the budget and that type of thing, it's something we can deal with. So sorry, I just don't have enough detail on it, but.
Yeah. Got another one that, as it relates to, we're a community organization, regions of county with multiple eligible rural communities, contiguous communities of 50,000, and leveraging resources throughout all of them. Are we eligible? Can we serve the rural communities throughout the county? This gets back into the eligibility that the majority of your communities must be low-income communities in the region that you define. I do have a concern when you say contiguous cities of less than 50,000. I would encourage you to go into our eligibility map and work with your state office to see what is a rural area. The eligibility criterion is if the total region you're dealing with is less than 50,000, that's great. If your region is over 50,000 in total residents, you have to have low-income communities, a majority of low-income communities, low-income rural communities. So I guess what we're saying here is you define your region as it is. You don't have to serve every town within that county. You define the region. It can be as delineated as far as census tracts as to what you're doing. So work with your state office, take a look at our rural communities map. If you've got contiguous cities of less than 50,000, they may be considered an urbanized area. And then a question, can the applicant obtain a contract with a continuing education type entity to provide training for employees of the partner? And that, again, that's another one of those wide open questions. It depends on what that training is, and is it an industry cluster? Is it a targeted industry?
Yeah, if it's providing, training back to the businesses, individuals in that cluster, that's the focus of the application. I could see how that could work. If it's just a general continuing education program without a targeted region and without a targeted industry cluster, then I I would not see how that could apply.
Yeah. Then a question of would a professor leading a research in a land grant university suffice as a partner? Individuals are not eligible as partners. Your university may be a partner in the RISE partnership, but not individual persons within that university or eligible partner. Does ag tech innovation qualify? Agriculture, we can't fund agricultural production or things of that nature, but if you are doing an innovation center focused on a jobs accelerator for individuals and businesses entering the ag tech industry, and they have high wage jobs, that could be from there. We don't exclude any industries from the RISE grant application. Again, you tell us who you're focusing on. And do innovation centers need to be a physical space? Can it be virtual, serving one or more regions? There is always a physical space, whether you are, just like Will and I are each in a physical space, but we're delivering programs across the country through this webinar. So when we say the question, does it need to be a physical space, where are you located at? You can be in urban or rural, but if you're going to be building a new innovation center, it must be in a low-income community. Your programs may be partially virtual, maybe partially in person. We found this through COVID. But you tell us your plan for delivering the programs and creating high-tech or high-wage jobs. And question, can you be more specific when it comes to the 10% indirect cost? Are salaries considered indirect costs and limited to 10%? From there, a RISE grant was going to follow 2 CFR 200 requirements as far as the definition of in-kind contributions. It must be valued fairly. Will, you want to, again, we're kind of going back to that indirect cost.
Yeah, I think, if you're trying to match salary for, I'm picking on universities, I guess, but don't mean to, but if you've got staff for a university or professor, what have you, and their salary doing other functions, again, if there's a authoritative source that, from the controller or whoever's in charge of, financial department of that university that says, X amount of hours are dedicated to the innovation center, providing programming, blah, blah, blah. That's something we could look at in terms of the match. There is a 10% cap, remember, on administrative expenses for the grant, and also there's a 10% indirect cost that's capped as well. So again, the point of the program is we don't want to utilize all the funds for, for salaries of staff. And again, if there's any type of matching funds, it needs to be clearly shown that those funds, be it a in-kind match of salary, it makes sense that it's X amount of hours, times wage, benefits, what have you, dedicated to the RISE project. It's got to tie back to that RISE project. So understood that there's an indirect cost rate, and that's a big function, but when it comes to RISE, we've got those caps and those limits.
Then can a tribal college build a career technical education building and innovation center to allow students to receive certificates for careers and for students that aren't more comfortable in a college setting? Again, it kind of gets into, we're not funding educational programs at universities or education centers without more detail on exactly what this is. Is this in an innovation center part of what they're doing? Is it their training? Will, you want to?
Yeah, so, in that case, what is your targeted region and what's the particular industry cluster is what I'd fall back on. You know, that's where the heart of this is at. You know, we've got to focus on a particular industry cluster, not a general certification or a general academic program. While that's a component of the services provided by the Innovation Center, it's just like I said with the incubator part of it. That could very well be a component, but it's got to be targeted to that region's workforce, you know, in that particular industry cluster or clusters. That's the intent of RISE.
Yeah, and that, you know, people are asking, we get a lot of questions about the qualifying communities with distressed high concentration of employment. The energy distressed communities, again, that's a list that's, you know, we're going off of information provided to us by another source, but that only comes into play when we're scoring applications and we present our final scores to the administrator. The administrator will make the determination, and you're eligible if you're in a energy distressed community to receive administrator points. So it should not have an impact on your application. As to the materials you are preparing, we will use the most recent distressed energy communities information at the time that we're funding the applications and obligating funds. You know, just questions, you know, again, critical partners of county school district. County school districts, you know, they're public body. They can qualify as a partner. And going through, can 2 or more nonprofits constitute the partnership? That's a little bit tricky because a nonprofit can be a lead applicant in there, but rural nonprofit cooperatives can be a partner as well as private entities. So we can get that. We have several questions about asking for examples of things. I just want to remind people that RISE is a brand new program. We don't have any historical documents, any historical what's a good score, not a good score from there. So, you know, as far as examples of narratives, examples of what's a good score, examples of how other people have defined their region or that, we don't have that. Next year, when we do this again, we may have that available for you, but we don't have examples of previous applications.
So there's one follow-up, I guess, is, you know, asking if an institution or agency would be a provider of needed program services like training, should they not be a partner? We're not trying to push away, you know, good partners in the partnership, such as, you know, universities or institutions that have capacity to train, but just keep in mind that it, you know, again, the focus of RISE will need to be a particular industry cluster and a particular region. But yeah, we definitely can see the benefit of having one of those entities as a partner as well as a provider of training.
Yeah, I think that answers, you know, a lot of questions from there. Somebody asked, can you utilize the current space and have it housed in that space and not create a new space? Yes, if your innovation center is currently existing in that space or where you're operating out of, you can certainly do that. The restriction on RISE is that if you're creating a new innovation center or doing major renovations on a building, it must be located in a low-income community, but you can certainly use your current space.
So I think there's confusion with, you know, how the RISE funds would flow. And again, we're talking hypotheticals. So, you know, until we see something in writing, it's really hard to comment, you know, where we need to. But if you have a partner that, what we're saying is that the grant can't pass through to them in the form of a direct payment. Just, you know, we get a wide array of questions about that, getting paid for what have you. Now, if there is some type of service being provided and training that's being provided, and, you know, staff has to be covered. Remember, there's a cap of 10% on that. But really, you know, it's really hard to get into the details when we don't have anything in front of us. So there's, yes, the RISE funds can be used to pay for programming, but it must be clear that it's programming at that innovation center, you know, covering the cost to put on that programming. When we say direct payments, you know, we've had questions where money's just flowing, you know, they're saying that they want money to be paid through to another partner to then administer it, or you know, just administer the grant in general, or you know, for whatever other purpose. But if it's training or programming provided for the innovation center, we can work with that. So you know, I know there's some confusion about payments to partners, that type of thing. What we were talking about was just more general in nature. Also, you know, again, when it comes to setting up your budget, just keep in mind that everything needs to be tied to what's being provided at that innovation center, not, you know, not general programs or courses or what have you, other things that are, you know, RISE isn't a subsidy for your budget, is basically what I'm trying to say.
What we're trying to avoid with payments to partners is the conflict of interest. You know, conflict of interest is when a party involved gains a financial benefit from the grant. So, you know, if you're providing services and that type of thing, it's really not a conflict of interest because you're working specifically on a RISE project. But we don't want financial gain to anyone in the partnership. Still scanning through. Can we use RISE funds in the agricultural communities? Again, we welcome all industry clusters from there.
We've got our two partners better than one. Well, you have to have two partners. So yes. in terms of eligibility, you have to have two partners. We do get the question, you know, do I need a large amount of partners? Well, we don't have any type of set number of partners. You know, we're going to look at the quality of those partners in the partnership.
Yeah, and you know, will the applicant be addressed as a project unrolls? You know, there are performance criteria that we have. We will do, the staff will go out and visit with the lead applicant about project performance, and you'll provide project performance information to the agency as it relates to that. We want you to be actively providing and sharing information on not only where the funds are used for, but also the demographics of who you are serving. The current administration has a huge initiative as it relates to equity, as far as equity and reaching distressed communities and minorities, demographics, socially disadvantaged individuals. So we want that type of information from you. We'll be doing that on an ongoing basis. The grant is for 4 years, so you don't have to use all the funds in the first year. You project out your scope of work, how that's going to be handled and done. Question, a long question, I'm sorry. Define low-income rural community to offer training to individuals for high-wage jobs and meat processing. An industry cluster, it's greatly benefiting a low-income community and industry business, but the industry is not associated with developing new technologies or products. We're not talking about new innovations. We're talking about creating high-wage jobs in industry clusters that you define. So if you have an ag industry or processing is in your region as an industry and trying to tie those things together, that's what we're looking for. We don't restrict the types of industries that we're handling and working with. And a nonprofit would like to start a new program helping young adults that are still school-aged to give them skills they need to get a job. You know, again, we get that question quite a bit. I think we'll address that a little bit. We're not here to fund programs. educational programs. In schools, we're here to create jobs. So it would have to be more defined as to what we are doing, what the RISE funds would be. Again, you'd have to have a partnership, not just that nonprofit organization. And if an institution or agency would be a provider of needed programs, should they not be a partner? Yeah, we encourage partners. We want your partners. Your partnership has to work together. Will mentioned that we don't need a 60-page partnership agreement, but we need to have something. Somebody asked about a memorandum of understanding between partners. We want the partners identified in the application. We want the lead partner to be identified in the application as to who they're dealing with and who is involved in the partnership. A memorandum of understanding can be considered a partnership agreement if it has the right language in there that says we are committed to the project, what your responsibilities are within the partnership. That's what we're looking for. So we're running into time. We're at 12:50 Eastern time. So I don't want to. We know that everyone on the call also has valued their time as well. So I don't know, Will, you want to?
Yeah, just to close out, you've got the handout, so make sure you download those. From the copy of the slides to the NOFA to the regulation. Also, the recording, it takes some time to get it converted, and so know that that's going to be, I believe it was said 7 to 10 days. So just know that. Last time we had hundreds and hundreds of emails asking for the recording and worry about getting the recording, and I get it. But just know that it takes time to get that converted, and it will be posted on the website. And I believe Taylor's pulling up the website. And if you go to the bottom of the RISE website, you'll see where you can put in your email address and you can sign up for updates. So anytime the page is updated with, be it a webinar recording, frequently asked questions document, or anything, you'll get an update for it. So I will turn it over to Taylor if you have no further comment there.
Yeah, one more comment. Somebody asked, the June 22nd webinar recording and slides are also available on our website. And again, as Will mentioned, and Taylor's going to start speaking now, you can sign up for email updates. So as we post new things in there, you'll get a notice and a ping. So with that, I thank you, Will, thank you, Taylor, and everyone for being on the call.
This concludes today's session. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great afternoon.